Jordan Peterson got big because men have no role models. Now, this video is going to be kind of long, so I apologize ahead of time because I'm going to talk about why men have no role models, so what that void is, what it's all about, how Peterson was able to step in and fill it, and then I'm going to tell you why I've got a problem with him and kind of some of the things he's been saying. So it's going to be long. I might sweat a lot. I'm already sweating a little bit because his fans are crazy. I mean, they're really as hardcore as Bernie Bros. So I don't enjoy the idea of going up against him because his fans are really bad about suppressing dissent in different kind of ways. But I think it's important because when I go into my YouTube analytics, people may not know that people who have a YouTube channel can do this, but they show you like the breakdown of your genders. So like 90% of the people that watch my videos are men. I don't know why that is. Most of my videos are not gender specific. I don't know why it's such a sausage fest. I don't want it to be that way necessarily, but it is that way and I don't care. So obviously his demographic is mostly men. My demographic is mostly men. So I think that's more important than like Michelle Goldberg taking him on. It's like when John Oliver and Samantha Bee and Trevor Noah were going after Trump, and it's like, okay, his fans are nativists, so I don't know why the South African, the Canadian, and the British guy thought they were going to make headway with him. I don't know what that was all about. So I think it's important that I go after him because we have sort of a similar demographic that watches our videos. So first to talk about is why there's this void. So why men have no role models, because that's really important. And I think that's one of the biggest things in society that's kind of going unreported is that young men just don't have any role models out there. I mean, I grew up in the generation that was kind of all about TV anti-heroes. So like I grew up watching The Sopranos and Breaking Bad and Sons of Anarchy and The Shield, and I love those shows, but I don't think anybody would say Stringer Bell and Tony Soprano and Walter White and Vic Mackey were like great role models for people to watch. But that's what we grew up watching, was that anti-hero era. So I think people were more primed to vote for a guy like Trump because of the anti-heroes, where it was kind of like, yes. I mean, they would watch Vic Mackey like break the law and do all kind of bad shit and be like, he's a badass, he's the kind of guy that we want to be. And the same thing with Trump, where he comes in and he's just like, I'm going to grab him by the pussy or whatever. There's a certain kind of guy that thinks, oh, that's badass, that's so badass, you know. And I think that has really bled into the culture in a weird way. Like my mom has taught school for 40 years, and she says Trump has really changed things in terms of the boys that come into her room. Her kids are about 7th and 8th grade, and it's that kind of like that South Park age where they know about sex and they know about cursing, but you don't know that they know about it. So like a sweet little 12-year-old kid or whatever, they come in there saying fuck and damn, and it's like, whoa, what happened? You know, like you're kind of taken aback by it. But she said that the boys in her room will come in there and be like, I grab him by the pussy or something like that, where he's changed the way that the culture thinks. So the president kind of sets the tone for young men, I think especially, and our president is a horrible role model. I don't think anybody would say that he's not. I mean, he's been divorced twice, I think about to be divorced 3 times. I don't think anybody thinks he and Melania are, they're not a love for the ages. They're not Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson. He's got 5 kids with 3 different women. You know, he prizes money above all else. Like other Christians used to be like, oh, money's not that important. That's what they used to say. Now it's like money's everything. You don't have money, you're a loser. He puts that message out there and they go for that message. But even 50 years ago, I mean, reverends were like Martin Luther King Jr. and people like that, and those were the preachers that you look up to. Now it's people like Trump. The Creflo Dollars are in charge of the black church, where it's all about prosperity preaching and how can we get more money, and Joel Osteen and all the prosperity preaching. So you've got an environment where there's prosperity preachers, there's TV anti-heroes, and all these things prime the pump for like a culture that's only cares about how badass you can be, and made the way for this bonfire of the vanities, you know, Gordon Gekko type character to become president. Now, another thing, and liberals, they hate talking about this, but the destruction of the nuclear family. Now, I know that's such an old-fashioned, shitty term that nobody cares about, and I'm not going to be defending Peterson, but America's got the highest divorce rate in the world. We've got the highest teen pregnancy rate in the world. We've got the highest out of wedlock pregnancy rate in the world, highest accidental pregnancy rate in the world. And all these factors spread out over about 30 or so years, because most of Jordan's fans are male and white male and young. So they all kind of come from that similar background of there's the culture of divorce, and a lot of kids, their parents were never married and then they never knew their dad that much, and they've kind of not had that male presence in their life. They've not had a dad to know what a dickhead a dad can be, so they seek it out from somewhere else because they don't know that they're really not missing that much. But that whole thing about the family structure. And now keep in mind that that's how people like Peterson always, that's the void that they always fill. Hitler, okay? In World War I, a lot of German men were dead. They were completely dead and wiped out. So then Hitler comes along. Germany's a culture of orphans. There's a lot of orphans at the time. There's a lot of people with no fathers because they went and died in World War I. Hitler comes along and says, I'm going to be your daddy. I'm going to be your surrogate daddy. Okay, we'll follow you, you know. And that's how they're able to do stuff like that, is there's a culture with a lot of orphans. Al-Qaeda and ISIS are spreading around these countries that they've been in wars for, God, in Afghanistan for almost 30 years continuously and stuff. So that's how they're able to attract new recruits and young men that they crave that father figure, that sort of person. And Peterson's able to fill that void. Now, that's the void that exists. But you've also got the fact that, like, women are surpassing men in a lot of different ways. Like, there's more women in medical school. There's more women in the legal field. Like law school, there's way more women than men. More women are entering college. More women are graduating from college. Women are beginning to get higher paying jobs than men. I'm talking about the fields themselves. Like, the pay gap definitely exists. See, that's one thing Peterson doesn't think it exists in terms of men and women anybody who says that has never been relying on a woman for their salary, okay? My wife makes the majority of the money, so the pay gap's very real because that means we don't go on vacation or we don't do some of the stuff that we like to do. So it's real. And anybody who says different, they've never had to rely on a woman's salary, really. And I think that when you start getting into, like, okay, women are going to surpass men, women are going to be the majority breadwinners. Well, a lot of men, they called the recession the man session because construction and a lot of the fields that hire men, construction and manufacturing were pulling back, and then a lot of fields that were hiring women, they weren't hit as bad and stuff. So you're going to start seeing a country where women make more money than men. They're the majority of the breadwinners. You're going to see marriages where women typically will make more money than men. You're going to see it kind of flip from where it was in the 60s. And I'm pretty fine with this. I think most guys are fine with it. I don't know if a lot of women are okay with it. So there's a lot of women that are still like, I need a guy who makes more money than me. Well, you might be lonely in that case because, all women kind of want that. But I don't know how realistic that is anymore. And you still see them out here, even in Los Angeles, a progressive place like Los Angeles. You still see them fighting that last culture war battle. And I think Peterson's able to step into that anxiety about what is a woman. In this society, we know what a woman is. A woman can be Meryl Streep, she can be Hillary Clinton, she can be Wonder Woman, she can be Beyonce, she can be Nicki Minaj, she can be Christian Gillibrand, Kamala Harris. So there's a lot of fantastic role models for young women out there. And I know people hear me say, well, men have no role models. That's ridiculous. I mean, what about all the presidents, every president who's ever been before Trump and, Einstein, people like that? Well, those are historical figures. And that's very different than like having a living, breathing, flesh and blood role model. Women's role models have never been better than they are today. And they don't have to go to historical figures for that. And men's role models are pretty lousy. I mean, our president is lousy. And then somebody like Barack Obama, who he is a great role model, where he's married to a woman, he's got 2 kids, and he's a great father, and he did all the shit that Peterson talks about doing. But Peterson never talks about Obama. He never puts him up there as a great example of manhood. Gee, I wonder why that is, because probably way more than 90% of Peterson's fans are white. He's not just a male supremacist, he's a little bit of a white supremacist. He doesn't think white privilege exists and all these old kind of things. A lot of his men are white males, okay? So, and I think that's key in terms of why he doesn't put Obama out there as a great role model. For me and my son, I think Obama's a fantastic role model. He's the kind of guy you'd want your son to grow up to be or to look up to or whatever, but he doesn't ever put him out there. And that's very telling about Peterson. There's a lot of things that are telling about him. And he's able to fill that void. But why I have a problem with him, and there's a lot of reasons I got a problem with him. One thing he does that drives me fucking nuts is he keeps saying, well, as a clinical psychologist, psychology is the most broad field there is. It's the most subjective field there is. You're talking about Sigmund Freud and Dr. Drew are in the same profession, okay? Dr. Joyce Brothers and Carl Jung and Dr. Ruth and everybody in between. And it is incredibly subjective depending on who you are, because the psychiatrist and the psychologist, they feed into the studies because the type of person that they pick for the studies. there's all kind of bias about this, and it's been recorded and documented, well documented. There's going to be bias in that study. And anybody would talk about this. So when he starts quoting something and saying, well, any clinical psychologist worth their salt, there is no fucking broad consensus about a lot of this stuff that he's talking about. It's not physics. He's talking about psychology like it's physics-based. And because some Canadian dude who went to a shitty university, I mean, a lot of the colleges he went to, I've never heard of them, okay? But because he was the Alberta intellectual, okay, which is borderline hilarious, he's like the preeminent thinker about psychology, or so he puts out there. But he set up this great thing for his fans. On the one hand, whenever you disagree with him, be like, well, he's a clinical psychologist. And then the next breath say, well, there's a way more famous, better clinical psychologist from Harvard. Oh, that's groupthink. So on the one hand, they love his professional credentials when it backs up what they think anyway. But when somebody's even bigger than that, in terms of like they're more respected in their field, they've got more degrees, they've got more experience, and they're to Harvard or Yale or something like that, like a way tougher college, it'd be like, oh, well, they're part of that left groupthink or something. So people don't really give a shit about his credentials. That's not what this is really about. That's like with Trump, okay? Oh, he went to Wharton Business School. And then, well, Hillary Clinton or, Obama or Bill Clinton, they went to Yale. Well, who cares? That's just part of the, like they just selectively use that to be like, well, some guy who went to Wharton thinks how I think, or something. They're just using that for confirmation bias. And I don't even think that the void of manhood is necessarily why all people are going to him for this uplifting man message, because when you look at his videos, and I'll admit, I'm impressed. Some of his videos are like 3 hours long. They are dry as dirt, and people, like 2 million people have watched them. Okay, me over here, I'm worried this video is going to be 20 minutes long and like 5 people are going to watch it. So I'm feeling unconfident that like this video is too long, nobody's going to watch this. He doesn't give a shit. It's like, here's 2.5 hours of me talking about paint drying or something, and people just flock to it or whatever. But those videos where his hardcore fans will watch the 2 million people will watch him talking about a dry lecture versus the 20 million people that will watch him debating political correctness and transsexuals and all that. His core fans are one thing, but I think a lot of the people that flock to him and will defend him and all this stuff, they're mostly going for political correctness and identity politics, and he's pushing back against women that are dominant and transgender this and gay that, and a lot of the things that they don't like about society. So I think that's the much larger group that's following him to put out a message that they already agree with. So I don't think that his first book, Maps of Meaning, I don't think a lot of them have even read that. I don't think that group is really as big as the people that defend him. Okay, I think they're going for him for a different message completely. And I think he practices identity politics. He bitches and moans about identity politics all the time, but he practices that because people that go for him, they're young men, they're going for a message that they want to hear, that he's spreading to them. He pretends when he's talking to female reporters and things like, oh, I'm so tough on young men. I tell them to grow up and quit being babies and all this stuff. And I'll admit, a guy like me, he would have no use for a guy like me. As I said, when you got a stay-at-home dad or a woman that makes most of the money, he looks at these kind of relationships as bad. He thinks that this is bad. This is and it's not because it's bad for me or bad for my wife, which is what he would say. It's bad for him and this like outdated 1960s views that he has. I watched an interview, the Kathy Newman interview. He looks like a genius in that because I think she did a lousy job of debating him, and she did put words in his mouth. So I wish she had interviewed me because I think I would look like a genius. But I watched other things like the Vice interview that he did where he's like, well, why would a woman wear makeup to work unless she's trying to attract a man? Like, why would she do it besides sexual arousal? And he even got mad that the guy was even debating that point about him or something. He was very emphatic about certain things. And of course, women, they might just want to look good. They might want to look good for themselves. But also, they might want to compete with other women. I think that it's very telling about him that he can talk about the lobster. He's always talking about that fucking lobster, okay? And how men have evolved to a point where we've picked up traits from the lobster about competitiveness and, structures and hierarchical structures and dominance and things like that and being competitive. But he won't put that on women. So women that wear 6-inch tall stiletto heels that are walking around like, oh, they're doing it because it enhances their womb. A man could put a baby in that womb. They're doing it because they're taller than other women. There's a dominant factor that goes like he knows about the male ego, And he can understand that in competition with the man, but he can't put that to women. He can't be like, oh, women have an ego, or women have a need to compete, or women want to one-up each other. And if they're more beautiful than the woman next to them, that says like, I'm here and I'm ready for that job and I'm ready for that, I'm ready to be at the next level or something like that. But he can understand why men would wear suits and all these different things, and he can understand why for a job and for a promotion and to compete with other men, but he can't put that on women, which I think is very telling, okay? And then, there'll be other things about sex. He's got a lot of really old school ideas about sex. He thinks sex is dangerous in some kind of way. These are not new ideas. And I think that he likes the idea that they're not new ideas. Like, he would say that because what he's trying to do is he's trying to say, oh, this is common sense. This is common ground, common sense, old school wisdom. This is old school wisdom. Truthfully, a lot of these ideas would be pretty dated even in the 60s, okay? So even in the 60s, a lot of these ideas would be kind of like, okay, what is he talking about, But we live in an era where everything's a kaleidoscope, and there's all these different views. There's no broad consensus on immigration or sex or the Me Too movement or gay people or transgender this or that or the pay gap. The pay gap's very real, okay? But he doesn't admit that it's real. And so there's no view on any of this stuff that's like a broad consensus. And so in an era where there's no consensus, he can come in and say, oh, we need some basic common sense. And it's a lot of these radical old school ideas that he's able to reproposition into this is just the normal. This is normal. This is what it should be. And this is what used to be normal. And it was never normal. Even in the 50s and 60s, people were debating these things about the nuclear family. And there's never been a broad consensus about what he's talking about. But he's able to reproposition that because, again, a lot of his fans are younger than 40 years old. They don't know what he's talking about. And the ones that are old men, we're just so glad somebody's sticking up for these kind of values and stuff. Like, they just want that nostalgic, 1950s Mayberry feel that the country never had. But because we weren't alive at that time, young men don't know it. And old men, they just remember when they were a kid, everything was better because they were younger. Fran Lebowitz had that great quote that said, the past was better because I was young in the past, And so when you're old, nothing looks that great. People always say, well, why do women hear one thing and men hear something else, okay? And I think it's that great men are from Mars, women are from Venus thing where women, they like, I think men hear what he's saying literally. Like, they hear what he's saying, like, literally about enforced monogamy or something like that, and they think he's talking about, like, something positive, like for me, I'm a liberal, so I would support like your employer covering your marriage counseling. Your wife wanted it, because if both of you don't want it, then there's no point going. But if you both want it and you want to go to marriage counseling, your employer would cover that, which I think is great. That would be a positive thing. But that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about, like, I think women hear like Taliban brides or like, sex slaves or something. The incel losers is what they hear when he's speaking, and that's probably closer to what he means. So men are hearing him literally. They're looking at a transcript of what he says, and that's why they fall for his lawyer ball bullshit, where he's like, oh, no, you're misquoting me. I didn't say that. You're misquoting me. Everything's misquoting him and stuff. He says something and then walks it back. And it's funny for a guy who hates political correctness and mincing words. He does it all the time, which is really kind of weird. At least Trump's like, yeah, fuck it. Here's what I think. And Peterson's always trying to play those word games, the marketing rules and stuff. But women hear the vibe of what he's saying. Like the tone of what he says, the way he emphatically doubles down on certain things. Like he'll be talking about dominant or some kind of imbalance in the relationship. Like, it's very bad. It's very, very bad. And you can tell that he gets angry. And you see him, what he emphasizes and where his eyes go. His eyes go to that dark place. To me, it seems very obvious this is a guy that's going to have like a dead hooker in the trunk in a couple of years. Like his eyes just go too dark too many times. He really reminds me of like Commander Fred from The Handmaid's Tale. That's really how he comes off to me. But I think women know when the guy doesn't like them. They can pick up on that. They're very good at like the in between the words, the syllables you choose to focus on. So all these incel people being like, how come women don't like nice guys? Well, you're not nice guys. And that's what you have to understand first and foremost, that you're not nice guys, and they can tell that. And they can pick up on that because they're very good. Women know when men don't like them. They've been doing this their whole lives or whatever. So when a guy's like, well, we'll go on a date and I'll pay for it, and all you have to do is, cook and clean my house or something like that. And then they think in their minds like they're a nice guy or something, and women hear something very different than that. I think that's why you see the big gender imbalance, and why men and women see Jordan Peterson differently. But I think in terms of what men can do, I mean, there is a difference in terms of how men and women are headed. I mean, even my son's preschool class, you go into it, the girls are building like cool rocket ships and all this really cool stuff. Like they're doing real amazing things, and the boys are just hitting each other with sticks. And it's like, okay, and then during the programs, they'll be like, girls are great at math or something. And then they'll be like, what are boys good at? Oh, who gives a shit? No, anything, I guess, you know? The idea is that boys, they have so much confidence out of the womb, they don't need any confidence. And of course, that's not really true. Boys don't grow up thinking like I'm better at math than girls. That's something that society does. But when society's message is girls are great at science, they're great at math, they can do anything, and boys are not hearing that they can do anything, then they're kind of starved for that message. I think Peterson's giving it to them. But I think if you can embrace a new society and a new paradigm where a lot of women are going to be the breadwinners, and a lot of men are not going to get paid as much as they used to, and a lot of men are not going to, you know, if you can kind of like, again, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, but if you can meet into Earth rather than going the Peterson way, which is the Trump way of being like, oh, we're going to bring back coal and steel and we'll have a hard-working man out there with the steel mines and all this shit. I think there's going to be a different way of doing things. And you really shouldn't kid yourself that's going to continue to be the case. And long term, I think people are going to be more miserable with Peterson's rhetoric than they would have been if they hadn't. I know he said he gets 25,000 letters every 6 months or something where men write him and say, you saved my life, you saved my life. Well, that's temporarily because they needed that confidence boost and that message of what an old-fashioned man is. They needed that, but they're going to go out there for a year and be like, okay, well, women, I've got all this confidence and they don't want to bow down to me, and I can't get a job that's in the field I wanted in or something, and they're going to have a really hard time with that shit long term, and then probably be worse off than when they started. So rather than Trump telling them coal's coming back and Peterson telling them the old-fashioned man's coming back and 1950s morality's coming back, so let's all get ready for that. Rather than falling for that, if they go out and say there's going to be a new way and we need to embrace that and we're going to be fine, you know, women are not going to be my sex slaves, and they're not going to be like enforced in monogamy or something like that. I'm going to have free will. I'm going to have free will. There's not going to be a aspect to that. And they just go with that, then everything, long term, they'll be better off. And Peterson may not like that message, but, you know, fuck it.